Welcome to East Coast, West Coast. I'm your host, Danny Rocco, with my amazing co-host all the way from Seattle, Washington, Mr. Mike Flynn. How are you today?
Nice to see you. Good to be here with this super guest we have.
I am very excited for Mr. Bryan. How is Bryan? Bryan's in Arizona. He's beat our temperature like by quadrupled numbers, I believe. Bryan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. A cold front came through today about 106, but we'll manage. We'll manage.
The cold front of 106.
Yeah.
I love it. So Bryan's an amazing man, which everyone here is going to learn very quickly. So Bryan, I want to talk about, how did you start coaching high school? And then you went from coaching coaches how to coach high school, right, to the Paralympics and coaching wounded veterans. I mean, when you look back at that, what do you think of your career?
Danny, it's can't even like write the script for it. I was a runner myself. I was a high school state champ there in Washington State, and I always wanted to teach and coach. I wanted to teach back when I was in second grade, and teaching allowed me to coach. And so I started by working at a middle school. We had 325 kids in about 3 years. So it was really more of managing the kids and building relationships with them, teaching them things that they can use later in life. And it just progressed to the Paralympics, progressed to working with injured soldiers. And it, like I said, you can't even write the script down.
It's go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, it's interesting. You started as a high school coach in Olympia, but somehow you became a coach that other coaches wanted to hear from. How did that transition from a coach to a coach of coaches come about?
Well, when I first started coaching, the first thing I knew is I knew nothing. I started going to coaching clinics and learning myself. And then I went through USA Track and Field coaching education program. And then from there, I directed the Seattle All-Sport Track and Field Clinic for, 24 years. So I was able to continually learn as these coaches, these world-class coaches are coming in. And I always say there's no questions a bad question. So I was always asking questions. I was always trying to put myself around people that I could learn from, that I respected. And it just kind of snowballed where here I am today.
But somebody had to say.
Sorry, do you think that was your secret success of like constant learning?
Yeah, every moment I'm trying to learn something from somebody, and it's kind of crazy. I ask a lot of questions, and I'm sure that I asked some of my mentors crazy questions, but today coaches ask me questions, and they would like me to give them a good answer. And so I try to put it in terms that anyone can understand, and always go back to people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you've got to show, whether you're in the classroom or you're out coaching, that you really care about your students or the athletes.
That is well said. Did some of those mentors kind of propel you into those different coaching placements of maybe helping other coaches become a coach like you? Because I don't think many coaches do that in high school.
It's kind of crazy. You talk about the Paralympics. First of all, I started working with Volpin, the double amputee back in 1995, 96. I knew nothing about the Paralympics, the second largest sporting event in the world. And so by seeking people's advice and learning myself, going into prosthetic labs, listening to the athletes, that's something that you learn to do as you get older, is be wise and listen to your athletes, because you're going to learn a ton from them by little things they say. And it's not always directly said, but if you listen closely, you pick up on things, and your radar has to say, okay, I need to adjust this workout, or I need to cancel this workout. There's some issues going on behind the scenes that aren't going to give it a really good workout.
You mentioned the Paralympics. The story about you and Tony Volpin has to be one of the most touching in all the sports, but not known by very many people. Can you just talk a little bit about Tony, who he was, how you came to be his coach?
Well, I met him actually after a coaching clinic. I called him up, said, hey, I got a couple ideas for you. I had no plans to coach him. And we kind of hit it off. And then Tony had called me back in 96. We were on our second state championship bid, so I needed to get that season finished. His agent came down and talked to me, said, oh, by the way, he has a Texas billionaire that's going to help fund
No,
it.
don't tell that whole story. We'll get to that later.
The Texas billionaire, we'll just let him wander. Well, to make a long story short, Tony and I spent the whole year together, and he ended up winning 100 and 200 at the Paralympics. Tony's the equivalent of what Michael Jordan did to basketball. Mike, you and I were talking about this. The United States Olympic Committee is no longer the United States Olympic Committee. It's the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And I think people like Tony, and specifically Tony, had a lot to do with that. He really moved the Paralympic movement to another realm where I have the Olympic Channel on my TV, and they had the Paralympic World Championships on TV for like 8 nights recently. So it's gone from the Paralympics to something well respected around the world. And again, the second largest sporting event in the world.
Take a minute to just tell who Tony Volpin was.
Tony Volpin was born without hands and feet. And so he got in track in high school, and he went to Barcelona and won 100 and 200. And then I met him about 3 years later. And like I said, Mike, I knew nothing about coaching amputee athletes, but learned a lot through Tony, which then helped me move on to working with blind athletes, wheelchair athletes, cerebral palsy athletes.
Yeah. You muted. You muted. Okay.
I think I lost you for a second.
Yeah. But explain. So Tony had metal feet. His parents equipped him with feet, but they left the flippers on his chest, right?
Yeah. Now unmute, Brian. Now unmute yourself.
So Tony runs with prosthetics, and at the base of it, there's a foot, and the feet that he ran on are carbon graphite. And a lot of the technology from the foot was from the space program. And so he got into the initial foot, and then as technology improved, he moved up to better technology. And everybody's, oh, you're on this prosthetic foot, you're good because of that. No, it doesn't work that way. Any more than putting anybody in a NASCAR is going to make a great driver. You've got to have the skills and the techniques in order to take it to the level that Tony took it to. And he really, truly is the Michael Jordan of the Paralympics.
I'm curious, Brian, what made that connection between the two of you? What was that spark, and what made him so different than anybody else?
I don't know. I guess what you're trying to ask me is, how did we hit it off? Our personalities just kind of melted together. And I'm kind of someone who kind of sits back and looks and analyzes things and said, okay, how can we maximize the guy who's already won the Paralympics in the 100 and 200 and actually make him faster? And so we dialogued a lot. He actually lived up in Federal Way and drove down to Olympia and met me each day after school. So,
you two are from the same part of the country at the outset.
Yeah. And you know what, Mike? We actually live 5 miles apart now. He lives in Gilbert, 5 miles from my house. So we have definitely reconnected our friendship, and just exciting things are happening for Tony right now.
Yeah, that's a full circle relationship. Can you I'm just curious, before Mike goes on, because you have a very cool quote that you had told Mike about, or that you had a conversation with, but what is difference in training someone like Tony as opposed to someone that is born with, legs and arms? Because your arms have a lot to do with it.
Danny, I'm asked that question a lot. I don't coach them any differently. The one thing I do is I do keep an eye on the prosthetic legs, so that if there's a breakdown, there's like titanium bolts that hook on the prosthetic to the running foot itself. Mm-hmm. And so I keep a really close eye on that to make sure we don't have any wear and tear. Other than that, I just treat him just like I would an able-bodied athlete.
Mm.
The unique, one of the unique things, because there's multiple unique things, but who the billionaire was in Texas who didn't want to be known instead of seeking visibility, and how you found out who it was at the event itself.
Well, his agent drove down to Olympia to meet with my wife and I, and he just had this whole conversation, what do you want? Well, I didn't want anything to begin with, but Tony was really, really wanted to hire a professional coach. And so at the end of the conversation, his agent said, you haven't asked who the Texas billionaire is. Okay, who is it? He goes, Ross Perot. Well, at that time, Ross Perot was running for president again. And so I'd met Ross Perot, 2 or 3 times during our working. Phenomenal man. And the day that he passed away recently was one of the saddest days. I mean, it broke my heart. I'm sure that I was tearing up. I love the man. We actually adopted our second son with the money that Ross Perot paid me. We adopted him at birth. He's now 24 years old. Finished his second college degree.
And no effort to get any visibility on his part. He just did it.
He didn't care about visibility. No, not at all. He was really a caring person. He would actually call my school room a few times and just, is there anything you need? How are things going? And man, I just can't say enough wonderful things about Mr. Perot.
I'm just curious, how did he know about Tony? Did you know that?
Yeah, Tony met him at a rally in 1992. And according to the story, Mr. Perot said, if you ever need anything, Tony, let me know. And of course, Tony called him on it back in about 1995, and Mr. Perot came on board, and it was wonderful to have him part of the team.
Amazing.
Well, no doubt. How much, besides him checking in and things like that, did he go watch him train? I'm very curious about that.
He came to the Paralympic Games, flew in, and we were able to sit near him, and he asked a lot of questions like that gauge right there. And I said, hey, don't watch the time, watch the wind gauge. He's going to break the world record. So he was watching the wind gauge as Tony went flying by. And it was just exciting to see Mr. Perot excited to see a world record and all those TV cameras at the finish line. We joke about when the race was over, you could hear the chair flick back up because people were leaving. Tony's race really drew attention that day in Olympic Stadium in Atlanta. And to have it here in the United States even made it more special.
One of the things, we've talked a number of times about this, but you showed me a video about you and Tony in a hotel room the night before the event talking. And I said, what are you saying to him? And you said, I told him, you're going to win the gold medals tomorrow. And there's all kinds of handicapped kids who are going to need your autograph, and you're going to stay until the end. Can you just talk about that a bit? Because there was visibility nationally for that.
Right. The video you're referring to, folks can watch it on TonyVolpintest.com on media and go down to videos. It's the upper left-hand video. But I had mentioned to Tony, I said, he's a trendsetter. Like I mentioned earlier, he's like the Michael Jordan of the Paralympics. And I said, Tony, when you're done, there's a lot of kids that came here, a lot of adults that have came here to watch you. So when you're done, we're waiting for the medal ceremony or after, stay and sign autographs. And I remember specifically the next morning getting up and reading, I believe USA Today or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They actually commented in it that Tony had stayed and signed all these autographs for the little kids and the public at large that really wanted Tony's autograph.
That's cool.
What an amazing, you must have seen him grow into such an incredible man through that. And to know you had a part in it.
He is. He's a great role model. He's done a lot of things to help the Paralympic movement as a whole. He's been a spokesperson. There's currently a movie kind of in the makings. You can go on starmentors.com and check out. Hopefully the movie's going to be rolling out here maybe in the next 3 years. And thank goodness that Star Mentors stepped up to the plate and is going to tell Tony's life, hopefully.
Wow. That's very cool that you have a part of it. So, your career kind of took this shift. You were working with handicapped individuals, and then you started focusing on veterans, and you're involved with veteran groups around the country. How did that happen?
Again, it's kind of crazy. I got a call right after I returned from Athens. So I've been in Athens for the Paralympics when I was a head coach, and I come back and I get a call from Disabled Sports USA. And they said, hey, can you fly out in a week to Walter Reed and do a running clinic for some injured vets that are currently at Walter Reed? Sure. I mean, my body was on grease time, so I wasn't sleeping anyway, so what the heck. So I went back there. I actually made 4 trips, and 18 to Alabama, Texas, Colorado. I don't even know how many veterans I've been blessed to help and be a part of their lives and their families' lives. But it's a blessing for me to be able to help them.
Recently, you ran across, and you did in Seattle, an event called Words Matter. There can't be a more appropriate time than today for that phrase. Can you talk about that a little bit? How'd you put it together, and what does it mean to you now?
Well, after I retired, I started getting a lot of emails and phone calls and texts from former students from 30 years ago. And they would say, oh man, I remember when you said this back to me in 1995, it had a huge impact on my life. Thinking, that's great. But you always think, you coach all these athletes, you teach all these students, and you think, oh, the standardized tests are so important. Well, they're important. What about the relationships you're building with these athletes and students? So I began to sit down. I said, man, I got to tell the story of what some of my athletes, my students, my family have told me about really special words that we say that we have no idea that change someone's life. 2 of my favorite athletes, Tommy Smith, the 68 Olympic champion at 200 meters, and Jim Ryan, probably the greatest distance runner ever, who, by the way, is getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom on Friday from President Trump. They would say things or they would do things, and gosh, it inspired. I mean, I never used drugs, I never smoked, I never drank. You know why? Because I wanted to be Tommy Smith and Jim Ryan. Their words, their actions made me, as a young youth growing up, to want to do the right thing because of them. And maybe I've been able to do that, and I can pass that message on to a young teacher or a young coach that go there every day and they're just getting beat on from all sides, that, hey, look, you're making a huge difference. You can't believe what these former students and these athletes have told me that I did that I didn't even realize. That's why words matter.
Well, how did you decide to put that together, though, in a presentation?
There was a clinic in Seattle, which I used to direct, and they brought me back up to be the keynote. And I just sat down on my computer and just talked from my heart and just went right through different stories. I always felt that good speakers are great storytellers. So I just got up. I didn't know how it was going to be received. And then coaches are coming up to me, here, Mike. They just couldn't believe the words there. One young man came up to me. He taught like 8 months or something like that. And he goes, oh man, I just feel like I'm getting run over. He goes, I really needed to hear what you have to say. And so hopefully I can continue to do that and inspire someone or change someone's life.
How does a message like that seem to be necessary now?
All you have to do is turn on TV for about 10 minutes and go, hey, these guys on TV need to hear this presentation. The words we say they're so critical. I remember back when I was running it in school, and gosh, I wasn't doing that well in school, and I hadn't really found a sport yet. And I went out on this playground run and beat everybody. And this coach comes up to me and says, man, you are so fast. I still remember where I was standing on the playground that day when that 5th grade teacher, who, by the way, suffered from childhood polio, but he made a huge difference in my life. And then just different people that I meet, that they say things, I go, wow, that's just incredible.
Danny, the amusing thing is, he and I have won on the same track. And he was a high school 440 star record setter, and I'm an old guy who runs 100 meters, but I won last year in my event.
Well, Mike, you are speedy. You are very fast.
I'm not racing Mike Flynn. I'm telling you that right now. I know what's good for him. I'm not racing Mike Flynn, folks. This guy can roll.
Mike, I was telling Bryan in an earlier conversation, like, I have to run when I walk next to Mike. When we're like just walking to a restaurant, I have to run to keep up with Mike Flynn. He's just walking.
Definitely.
He's on a mission.
Every event is a race for Mike, but that's why he's so fast.
Okay, let's move on, Danny. What's another question?
Well, I want to know how did you decide? You said you talked about retirement. We're coming to the end of the show. What does that look like for you? And how do you actually fully retire? I mean, your career has blossomed. And I think really after listening to you, it's because you come from a place of service. You've never said, I know everything. You're always wanting to learn more, expand more, bring the best that you can. So what does retirement look like now for Bryan?
One thing I've learned, Danny, is I'm not going to say I'm retired, because every time I say that, and I don't plan to work on with athletes or soldiers or get involved in the Paralympics or coaching it or whatever, somebody calls me up. So I found if you don't say it, you'll probably be able to retire. But I'm not going to retire. I'll just keep doing things and, go out and watch Mike set the world record and, be on Oprah's show like I was telling. But yeah, it's not what it's cracked up to be. You think, oh, I'm going to retire. I'm just going to kind of kick around. No, your phone will be ringing. You'll be getting emails. You'll be getting texts. You'll stay busy.
Well, you're needed. And Cindy's watching, and Cindy has a company called Sacro Wedgie. So she's like, afterwards, we need to send her where she can mail these to you. I'm not going to go into and explain it to you. I'll send you information, but you have some gifts coming your way.
Great. Tell her thank you.
Oh, you can tell her she's watching. So there we go. That's perfect of live interviews. If you could tell anybody, if you could leave us with maybe one of the most meaningful things that come to your heart, or what's the word I'm looking for, Mike? Advice for the people out there, anybody out there. What would you give? Inspiring, yes.
When I first started teaching and coaching, I would have told you, oh, it's success. It's a state championship, it's a world record, whatever. What I would tell you today is you aren't going to believe what the people you work with are going to tell you down the road about the things that you did, that you said and did that changed their life. And so always keep an open mind. Remember to care about the person first. Find a way to help people. When you're kind of down, I mean, let's just be honest. The last 4 or 5 months hasn't been a lot of fun, but there's got to be somebody out there that you can help in some way to make their life better. Find a way to do it.
Thinking outside yourself. That's perfect.
Right.
So you're not doing any coaching now, obviously, for this during the virus.
I'm not right now. I guess my focus is on a foundation that I'm a board member of, the Invictus Foundation, and it's out of Renton, Mike, and they help soldiers with the invisible wounds of war. And then definitely energy put into Tony's movie. Star Mitters is working hard on it, and I want to help do anything I can to get Tony's story out. And Jay Jaworski, who's the head of it, has done a phenomenal job to this point.
You might find out more about that foundation. That's cool.
Yeah, that foundation sounds, and that's out in Washington?
It's actually in Renton.
South of Seattle.
Yes.
Okay.
Close to where Mike is. So I come up to see Mike and my good friend, Dr. Bob Grzenik. I try to contact Invictus Foundation and see how Peter Whalen is doing with it.
Man of many talents. No, you will never retire.
No.
You will always be with us in some form, doing something. It keeps you young, keeps you running, so you can run after Mike. Catch him.
I'm not racing him. I talked about wisdom earlier, and wisdom says you got to pick your battles, and a battle with him on the track is not the battle I'm going to pick. I'm smart, Danny.
I don't know. Maybe just for fun, I'll end up there the same time you're there. We'll all visit Mike and we'll we'll redo the same track. I'll film it. I'll be the commentator. I think this is something good.
You keep him occupied and I'll race him.
Right. Okay.
All right. Well, everybody, you can wait for that with bated breath. This will happen. I will convince them one of these days to get the race going. But Bryan, thank you so much for sharing your story and your passion and your heart for all these years. And then, right now, today with us, you're an amazing man. Mike, you always know what to say and do, and the people that are around you. I am so blessed to have both of you in my life. So thank you. And thank you everybody for watching. And until the next time, when the East and the West Coast collide, we will see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.